If you don't want to get injured, there's one way you can make sure you never get injured, and that's you just sit your ass at home on the couch, right? Don't leave the couch. Sit there with your bag of chips, watch the game with all the other normies, and don't ever go to jiu-jitsu. And that's how you can make sure you never get injured.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Delbra.
Hey guys, welcome to the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. And today we're going to discuss the 5 systems that every beginner should learn. And there will be probably a little bit of difference of opinion when you're listening to this. I think a lot of people have preconceived notions about what a beginner should learn. So this is just my opinion. It's all very subjective, but I will talk about why I think these are very, very important systems for every beginner. Plus, I also want to talk about a tournament that I did on the weekend. By the time you would have heard this, it would have been 2 weekends ago. And this was down at the Revolution in Puyallup, Washington. The Revolution is one of the biggest tournaments in the Pacific Northwest, arguably the biggest tournament. I'll talk about my experiences there. Spoiler alert, did not go as planned, did not go well. But I think there is lessons to learn, and I'll just talk about what happened. Before we get started, please support the show. Check the links in the bottom. Subscribe to my online academy. If you can't do that, the least you could do is to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review wherever you can. Check out my YouTube channel, the On Guard Online Academy, where I release weekly technique videos. Again, really, really helps me if you guys comment, even if you say this sucks, and leave a like. It really, really does help. And if you like the show or you like my techniques on YouTube, please share it with your friends. Every little bit helps, really helps me gain exposure, helps the channel grow, and doesn't cost you anything. All right, guys. So 5 systems for every beginner. Again, this is subjective. And I think that a lot of people would insist that beginners learn, things like closed guard and traditional positions, right? Get to the guard recovery, guard retention. Of course, these things are very, very important. I think guard retention and basic recoveries and defensive positions are the bedrock foundation of every beginner's game. Every white belt should learn their game from the ground up, in my opinion. I also echo sentiments of like Danaher and Gordon, where it's, let's talk about pin escapes, submission escapes first, and then kind of build our way up from the bottom to the top, so that takedowns are essentially one of the last things you learn, which is odd. But in this sport, you really don't even need takedowns. You could pull guard literally every match and win tournaments this way. If you're going to be competing in ADCC, it's a little bit different. It's wrestling-based submission fighting. However, in let's say a pure jiu-jitsu IBJJF format, you could win worlds without doing a single takedown. This is the truth. So I would say takedowns aren't as crucial of an opening skill for beginners. This is not to say you shouldn't learn skills like regarding or break falling or things like that, submission escapes. Like I said, these are fundamental core systems that every beginner should learn. But in terms of like systems, series and dilemmas, positions, these are my 5 picks. And again, you could disagree with them if you want. Let me know in the comments what you think. I will go into detail why I think these are fantastic systems. All of these systems are things that I use. And I think every white belt should learn them within their first 2-3 years. Okay. So system number 1 is going to be half guard pins and half guard passing. This was actually something that I learned later on in jiu-jitsu. I learned this later on because I developed more of a movement-based game in my 20s, and any pass that I would do would be things like X passing, Toriando passing. Those are the types of passes that I really liked. I like to create movement and scrambles. As I got older and older, I really started trying to slow things down, and obviously I was inspired by watching guys like Gordon and GSP, and these guys are the bread and butter of their passing is half guard passing. One of my favorite instructionals is Danaher dynamic pins and half guard passing. And this is something that Joseph Chan talked about when he was on my show. He said is probably one of the best or most underrated instructionals on the market today. It's a gi instructional, and it's absolutely true. That is one of my favorite instructionals. from John Danaher, and it's all about passing through the half guard. Passing through the half guard is something that will happen at every single level. And it's also something where if you don't know how to pass through the half guard and you don't know how to escape half guard passing, you're going to get fucked up for sure. Because the half guard is kind of halfway to a closed guard, which is a pretty safe position in jiu-jitsu, and getting your guard passed, you're always going to find yourself there. The main characteristics of half guard passing are you're pinning your partner's head and shoulders first, then getting your leg free second, where a lot of loose passes have to do with clearing your legs and flanking your opponent and then getting control of the head and shoulders second. But obviously, people with good guard recoveries will get their knees inside and give you a lot of problems in that last 10 to 15% of the guard pass. And a lot of the time, you'll do a lot of work with without getting the desired goal, your score, guard passing. So by learning how to pin in the half guard, you don't even need to clear your leg first. You just need to find a way to get chest to chest and get past your opponent's knees. Once you get past your opponent's knees, you can get access to the upper body through inside position. Usually it's some form of underhook. And by doing this, you do a really good job of immobilizing your partner's head and shoulders. This essentially is a pin, something like mount or side control, but you're still in the guard. You've still pinned the head and shoulders, and you can apply devastating pressure from that position, and then you pass the guard second. I really like this position because it exhausts your opponent, and it breaks them down mentally as well as physically. Over the course of a match, if you're really, really good at half guard passing, you can absolutely destroy your opponent's ability to believe that they can actually win the match. And this is a method that we see used by Gordon Ryan. He talks about it a lot. And so when I saw him really starting to turn from a leg locker back taker into a guard passer, top player, specifically half guard passing, it really inspired me to look into this. Okay, there's something here that I'm missing. And I keep in mind, I was a black belt at the time. I'm not saying I never passed through the half guard, but I was missing intricacies that would allow me to pin my partner in certain ways. And once you learn how to do half guard passing, I believe you truly learn how to hold someone down. There are advantages to pinning through the half guard where you can immobilize your partner, specifically because you're controlling their leg, that prevents them from turtling. And this is something that if you try to pin them in the same way from side control, often your partner can find ways to go to turtle. And so pinning in the half guard will prevent them from turtling. It just does such a good job of immobilizing your opponent. In MMA, we see guys go to half guard and they don't even try to pass. They just try and land damage from the top with strikes. And it really is a controlling position. It's exhausting. And as long as your partner can't recover their lower body position with their knees, you're going to be able to hold this position for long periods of time. On the flip side of that, half guard pin escaping is very, very important. And I kind of think of that half guard pins and passing and escaping are all kind of two sides of the same coin, right? If you're going to learn how to pass through the half guard, a lot of what you need to know is how somebody might need to escape from a half guard pin. And to learn how to escape from a half guard pin, you kind of need to know how somebody might pass through the half guard as well. So they're very much complementary, both offensive and defensive perspectives of half guard pinning, passing, and escaping. So half guard escapes, we've talked about half guard passing on this show. It was one of the first episodes I did. But Danaher talks a lot about, when you're escaping half guard pinning situations, how we want to understand and identify the different directions of pin escapes that we're going to try to free ourselves. Usually in one direction is a John Wayne sweep. It's one of the most fundamental, most efficient sweeps in the game. And then on the other side is going to be what he calls a high-low, which is like a bridge where you chop down your partner's leg and you off-balance them by chopping them into the head. Both of these actions work really, really well with each other because they're in opposite directions, and they create a reaction where perhaps your partner on top would have to base their hands out, and now you can get frames back to the inside position. To off-balance them downward, usually, when you're getting caught chest to chest in the half guard, you want to push your partner away, but when they've gotten, let's say, a crossface and underhook, it's very difficult to do this because you don't have your knees in front of your partner and they're dominating the inside space with the upper body. And so this is where a lockdown, or as the Danaher team calls a scorpion, is very, very useful in shifting your partner's weight downward so that you can get your frames back in front of their face and you can start to do certain recoveries from there. The most The king of the escapes from half guard pins, I would say, would be the knee elbow escape. It's probably one of the most fundamental movements you will learn as a white belt when you're recovering your guard is the knee elbow escape. It's all over different jiu-jitsu pins, from side control, from mount. There's the knee elbow escape is just king. It's like you see it everywhere. So anytime you're going to be stuck in a pin, whether it's side control, mount, chest to chest half guard, you're going to probably be looking to hit your knee elbow escape. And that is like one of the most effective common escapes in jiu-jitsu. When you're on top, let's just talk about half guard passing and the upper body controls that you might use. Crossface and underhook is probably the most common. Obviously, double underhooks, very, very powerful. But my favorite by far is a near side underhook and head block, right? Near side underhook and head block is so, so valuable because when you get the near side underhook, now your partner can't build up to an elbow. And this allows you to move directly into tripod passing. So a lot of people will just hunt the crossface and underhook, but they don't consider the near side underhook and head block. And a lot of the time, near side underhook comes when your partner's trying to get an underhook of their own. They try and build up on their elbow. But in doing so, in creating a post, they always leave that space under their armpit where you can punch a near side underhook. And I always employ my students to look for this near side underhook because it is truly, in my opinion, the best. And I prefer near side underhook and head block over double underhooks, even though double underhooks is very, very useful for certain situations like mounting and whatnot. Generally, your base of support tends to narrow. And I like having a free hand to post out on the other side. And also, it's like an action hand. It can push your partner's knee down. It can hand fight. Often it can take a double underhook if you want. So near side underhook and head block, very, very important. So to wrap things up, half guard passing is like my favorite type of passing. My goal is to get chest to chest in the half guard. Most of the time when I roll, I prioritize that over guard passes most of the time. And it is such a dominant situation. It's always something that I'm looking for. And it's always something that I introduce to my students of all ages from an early stage. And then playing games from there, getting them to try and hold somebody down when they're trying to get out. It's a very, very valuable skill. Passing through the half guard will improve your pins overall, in my opinion. And I just think that it's such a fantastic way to control someone. So by far, system number one that you must learn as a beginner is half guard pinning, half guard passing, and on the other side of the coin, half guard recoveries. All right, sticking with the half guard, system number two, my second series that everybody should learn from a beginner's stage is the Coyote guard. One of my favorite guards to play. Again, we are in the half guard and we are making the lower leg shift, as it's also known as. So if you guys want to check out like classic Coyote guard, my favorite guys to study are Jake McKenzie. Obviously, Danaher and Gordon are very, very good at explaining this type of guard. And it was developed by a guy named Lucas Leitch, who's a OG in jiu-jitsu, checkmat representative. And Lucas Leitch making the Coyote guard very popular probably like 20, 30 years ago. At the time, that was like the new shit. Like nobody could stop it, right? Like this guy was known for his half guard, and it's a guard that we still see used today. It's a guard that I use almost every single roll. There's so many different things we can do from that position, and it's such a strong dilemma for the person on top. The Coyote guard really, really creates a lot of control, and you really, really need to have as much connection as you can to your partner. What fucks the Coyote guard up is when your partner starts to disengage and basically like tripods, like a, how would you describe it? Like a downward dog, because they're building height with their hips. Now it'll be difficult for you to maintain that connection. You really want hip to hip connection, as much connection as you can. Usually you're going to use like a tight waist on your partner from the half guard, like an underhook to tight waist, and then a scoop on the leg. And you're really pulling them in, creating tons of torque on your partner's knee. You're basically giving them a choice. Do you want me to torque the shit out of your knee, or do you want to concede the sweep, right? Now, you're going to eventually go against people who understand the Coyote guard, and they're going to be able to base out with their hands. And as you're torquing their knee, even though you're really hipping in, it can be difficult to take somebody over. But when they post with their hands, it's just like what I explained with half guard passing. If you can make, or should I say half guard recovering, if you can make the person on top post their hands out because they don't want to go over, now there's gaps underneath their arms, and then this would be an opportunity for you to climb up to the back. So there's like a really nice trilemma when you're using Coyote guard, where you're either trying to roll them through, wrestle up to the back, or you wrestle up into a whizzer, and then you can take them over. And when played as a series of three, a trilemma, this is an incredibly valuable and potent system to learn. I really, when I referee local tournaments, I don't really see a lot of people in the white and blue belts divisions playing this system. And I really think that they should, because it is so powerful. I find I can sweep almost anybody with the Coyote guard, aside from people who are much, much bigger and stronger than me. There's a couple guys at my gym that it doesn't work on because A, they know that I'm going to do it every time. And also B, they're just like so much bigger and stronger that I just can't manage to get that type of torque on their leg. But other than that, if someone's my own size and I get to a strong Coyote position, it's pretty likely that that you're going to be able to sweep them. I will say this, that there is issues with the Coyote guard. Because you're in a half guard situation, your opponent has split your legs. So you don't have double inside position. So this means that you will be susceptible to backstepping from your opponent into leg locks. So what goes hand in hand with a good Coyote guard would be a good deep half guard, also a good reverse half guard where your partner sits out and now is essentially attacking almost like a saddle position. I would say in the gi, it's a lot more difficult for these attacks to be valuable because there's obviously no threat of a heel hook most of the time. And also there's certain grips that prevent the person from attacking your leg. So if you get really confident in the reverse half guard position, and again, check out Jake McKenzie. He's got tons of awesome content from the reverse half guard. Make sure that you study that position and play that position so that if your partner does backstep into like a knee bar, you have, you're aware of it and you know what you need to do to not get knee barred from there. And you can be very, very effective in terms of sweeping, getting on top. I actually love reverse half guard. It's kind of like the other side of the Coyote guard because the backstep is such a common reaction. And then there's awesome things that Jake talks about, like the knee twist. And when people backstep, he goes into what he calls the fishing net, which is essentially like a lockdown on the far leg. The Coyote guard is, I would say, the most effective series from the half guard. I think it's the series that everybody should begin learning. And then from there, you kind of go down rabbit holes into deep half, reverse half, and all of these different variations, right? And so, yeah, I just recommend half guard in general for beginners because, like I said at the beginning of the show, it is halfway between closed guard and getting your guard passed. And so you're always going to run into half guard. And I think if beginners really build a strong foundation in their half guard, it's going to do really, really good for their wrestle ups because that's just naturally a position you will wrestle up from. And also their guard recovery. You know, if you teach a student to just snag that leg when they're getting their guard passed and playing half guard, they can be very, very effective. And the Coyote guard or the lower leg shift is the natural position that one might go to if they're getting their guard passed and they just snag the leg and they can get an underhook. They could be very effective from there. So half guard in general, but the first system I would recommend is Coyote guard. Okay, now this third system for every beginner, this might throw people off. They might be like, why the fuck would you learn that third? There's so many other things you could learn. True, but I like this move. It is a move that works at the black belt level. It enters into leg locks. You could take the back with this move. It's excellent when you're starting to get crushed from the split squat. This position, this series is the Kiss of the Dragon. I love Kiss of the Dragon from Reverse De La Hiva. I remember when I was like first starting out in jiu-jitsu, 15, 16 years ago, and Kiss of the Dragon was just starting to be used a lot from guys like the Mendez brothers and the Miao brothers. It's like you could look at it as like an inside Berimbolo, right? Everybody knows the Kiss of the Dragon nowadays. And I think for beginners, it is so important to learn because, for all the reasons I said, I'm not saying beginners should go in and hunt leg locks, but it's a fantastic position to use to get to leg locks. It is a great way to get to the back. One of my favorite ways to get to the back. And so naturally, if you're going to be teaching Kiss of the Dragon, you're probably going to be teaching things like crab rides just because that's where you're going to end up. It is like a great introduction into modern jiu-jitsu for beginners. And so when beginners see, holy shit, like that's a really cool looking move. Not only does it look cool, it's actually pretty easy to do. And it takes us to really, really effective situations. It immediately sets the bar for the beginner that like, yes, this jiu-jitsu is modern. And this is like I almost look at Kiss of the Dragon as like a bridge between old school and new school jiu-jitsu. And nowadays, it's just something that we take for granted. Everyone knows Kiss the Dragon. Everyone uses it. Gi, no gi, it doesn't matter what type of fighter you are. You have to know Kiss of the Dragon. I also like it because it's one of the purest examples of an inversion, right? Maybe aside from a berimbolo, but again, I kind of consider it a berimbolo. Teaching beginners inversions, I think, is incredibly important. Not everyone can do inversions. I would say, like, if a beginner comes in, he's got a bad back, or he weighs 300 pounds, or he's like 60. You know, you don't see a lot of 60-year-old beginners, but older people do come in and start jiu-jitsu late. It is, aside from those examples of people, it is such an effective and honestly pretty easy to do move. There's a drill I'm sure you've seen. We do it a lot at the gym for beginners and for kids. It's called going around the world, where you're basically inverting from one leg to the other, doing an inversion on a standing partner. And this is kind of like an introduction to what you might be doing during Kiss of the Dragon. Like, before we put it into a context of what positions we're trying to get to, here's how you do an inversion. And that's going around the world, right? Inverting in between your partner's legs. And then that directly translates into Kiss of the Dragon. So I think that the reverse De La Riva in general is a fantastic position for beginners. I also recommend that, you know, when you put a beginner into a reverse De La Riva situation, it's so important to talk about things like creating tension and really engaging your legs, engaging your feet to have a strong connection to your partner's body. Because if your feet are not strongly connected, it's very, very difficult for you to make Kiss of the Dragon work. And so you always want to have things like, you know, flexed feet and whatever. Usually I prefer Kiss of the Dragon with an underhook grip on the leg, a scoop grip, but you don't even need that. You could do it from just an ankle grip. And I always recommend that my students check out guys like Dante Leone. He's probably one of the best examples of Kiss of the Dragon being used in the modern jiu-jitsu landscape, but also Mendez brothers, of course, so effective with Kiss of the Dragon. Is just a position that we see all the time. And like I said, fantastic leg locks from there. So it's one of the positions that has really stood the test of time. Like, berimbolos were so hot, they were so effective, and nobody could stop them when they first started. And now everyone knows how to stop them. People still use them, but I would say Kiss of the Dragon really holds up. Like, Kiss of the Dragon works at the highest level. And if you can invert quicker than your partner can defend, you're going to end up in a backside situation where you could be attacking crab rides, leg locks, wrestle ups, all different types of things. So system number 3 for me, Kiss of the Dragon for beginners. Teach beginners Kiss of the Dragon. It is not too advanced for them. And again, it will introduce them to like what the human body is capable of in terms of modern jiu-jitsu. It doesn't have to be just locking your legs around your opponent. It could be very, very cool going upside down, going in between your partner's legs and taking the back and doing all types of awesome stuff from there. All right. System number 4, Ashi Garami. Again, there might be some old school jiu-jitsu guys out there who think, you know, why would you teach Ashi Garami to your students when you could be learning other systems? Like, let's get to mount, let's get to side control. Side control is a system you should learn. True. Notice that like most of these systems are guarded positions. That's because, like I said at the beginning of the show, I believe that beginners should learn their guard first. You can always spot that brown belt or that purple belt who is a beast on top, but once you sweep them, they're horrible on the bottom, right? And this is because they've neglected their guard. And so I think that pretty much every beginner should focus on their guard first, you know, unless this is like, let's say somebody's getting into jiu-jitsu to become an MMA fighter one day. That's different. Okay, now our focus shifts, but let's say it's somebody who just wants to get good at jiu-jitsu. They just want to come in and play the sport of jiu-jitsu. For me, there's no question what they should be focusing on. It's their bottom game, you know, escaping pins, working from the bottom, becoming efficient in the bottom position, never getting pinned flat, never letting their opponent grab their head, etc. That type of stuff, submission escapes, building their game from the bottom up. And so I think Ashi Garami is an incredibly important system because like Danaher says, it teaches the student to wrestle with their legs. And when their student wrestles with their legs, grappling with the legs will create a lot more dexterity. And when the beginner develops this dexterity, their game is going to become a lot more intricate, and they'll be able to do a lot more intricate stuff as opposed to just like, you know, locking your legs around your partner and just holding on for dear life. One of my instructor, Rob Bernacki in Nanaimo, he doesn't let his beginners do close guard until I believe blue belt. This is a philosophy that I understand, but I never took on myself. I think close guard is a fantastic position for everyone. Kids, beginners, doesn't matter. everyone needs to have a good close guard. I think that close guard is kind of like a safe place that everyone should be able to go when they need to take a break, when it's an asymmetrical position. So in the sport of jiu-jitsu, it's very, very dominant, I would say, from the close guard player. Usually the top, in most cases, the top player, there's not much they can do, and they have to now escape before they can get offensive in most cases. So I'm not the kind of guy to shit on the close guard for beginners. I think close guard is a fantastic position, but Ashi Garami is a great segue into open guard situations. If you can develop a strong Ashi game from an early stage, look no further than the Danaher Death Squad. They developed Ashi Garami and used it to great effect against really, really high level guys. A lot of these guys, like Gordon, when he was using Ashi and leg locking everyone, he wasn't even a black belt yet. He was like a purple belt, and he was leg locking black belts. So Ashi Garami is a great way to off balance people from the bottom, to get underneath them, to open up sweeps, back takes, and of course leg locks. This is such a strong system for white belts, because a white belt who has a strong ankle lock, let's say, is going to be miles ahead of every other white belt in their division that doesn't focus on ankle locks. I see it all the time as a referee. When you're a beginner and you're refereeing like white belts and even blue belts to some degree, you can totally see what everybody invests their time in different systems. You can totally see the people who invest their time in a strong ankle lock, because they usually go into these divisions, they get to their ankle lock position, and once they snap it on, they just win the match instantly, right? And it's just kind of like that power of novelty when you're a beginner and you don't have a lot of tools in your toolbox yet. If you have a strong ankle lock, like, that can totally be the ace in the hole that helps you win tournaments. You could be going against guys who are much more positionally sound, but if you can get underneath them, sweep them, and then apply ankle locks, you can totally defeat better opponents using the ankle locks. So I kind of consider Ashi Garami and ankle locks as like kind of one series in itself. But yes, get students wrestling with their legs in open guards. Get students used to the idea of getting 2 feet to the inside of their opponent, which will deny things like half guard passing and whatnot. Getting underneath them, off balancing them. And of course, if you're going to be teaching Ashi Garami, this is naturally going to segue into positions like X guard, which is one of the strongest guards in jiu-jitsu, really. And so if you teach a white belt X guard and they are able to do it, that opens up so many different avenues for them to attack. So I would say, getting your beginners and even intermediate, everybody really, getting them used to Ashi Garami, getting 2 feet inside, getting underneath their opponents is one of the strongest series in jiu-jitsu, and it absolutely deserves a spot in my 5 systems for beginners list. Okay, let's talk about the last system. This is coming in hot. We already mentioned it, and it's close guard. I believe every beginner should know close guard. I made my living as a white belt by jumping close guard. Yes, you were allowed to jump close guard back when I was a white belt, and just cross choking everyone. And I had a lot of success for that in tournaments. It really hurt my fucking hands, but I was able to do it. And you could just spam cross chokes, I remember, as a white belt. And it's such a great situation to put yourself in as a white belt. If you get to close guard, now your opponent has to break the close guard before they can do anything. It's not like they can, if you're savvy in the close guard, they can't like do any bullshit Ezekiel's or, if they try and like Americana you in your close guard, they're just extending themselves and you just attack them. So I always try and spend 1 or 2 days a week with my beginners and with my kids where we're focusing on some kind of close guard attack, because in a tournament, close guard can be king, especially in the gi, especially for kids when the matches are like 4 minutes long. If you can get your kid dialed in to getting to a close guard position, they can be all offense and they can kill the clock and they can just rattle off cross choke attacks. And if you set up a cross choke attack and it's decent and your partner has to escape it, you just got an advantage, right? So you're ahead on the scoreboard. So I always say, like, get to closed guard. You'll be able to rest there. Let's develop closed guard. I would say from closed guard, one of the best things to learn is a good cross collar choke. This is obviously at the beginner level, right? Like, cross collar chokes are hard to get as you get more advanced, but for beginners, you're at least getting advantages. If you get a good grip, plus the cross grip sets up so many great attacks. I also recommend the classic example of pulling the arm across the center line, trying to go to the back and trying to do the pendulum sweep. These are like my two favorite systems for beginners from the closed guard. It's so effective. I mean, this is what we see Mika Galvao do. He's winning worlds by pulling the arm across the center line and then, going to the back like almost every time. Just jumping closed guard, pulling the arm across, going to the back and strangling world-class guys at black belt level. So it's like, it works clearly. And then, teaching your student when we're introducing closed guard to beginners, teaching them things like knee pulling, effective hand fighting, preventing the person on top from getting their effective grip so that they can stand up, keeping the top player on two knees, when to break them down. Generally, when the top player is trying to stand up, when they're on one knee and then they're trying to stand up to two knees, that's the time to pull them in, right? Like learning these little intricacies and building these foundational skills within the closed guard is what actually makes the closed guard effective, not learning moves from the closed guard, right? Shout out to Eco guys. You're right about that. You can't just learn a move from the closed guard and then expect to get it. You have to be able to break your partner's stance. You have to be able to prevent your partner from gripping you, and you have to have strong knee pulls in different directions. So by far, closed guard has to be on my top 5 systems for all white belts. All beginners, all kids need to have a good closed guard, especially strategically in a match. For the reasons I explained, man, you can kill time in there. You can frustrate your opponent. I remember one time I fought at the IBJJF Portland Open, and I fought a guy named Paulo Costa, who at the time was representing Gracie Humeta in San Diego. He has since moved. I think he's at Alliance now. I actually ran into Paulo at the gym in Vegas this year at ADCC, and he remembered me. We were like, hey, this guy is such a fucking beast. He put me in his closed guard. And I remember being in there and not being able to do a thing. And that's a really terrifying situation when you're in somebody's closed guard and you can't do something, because you're just like, fuck, I'm on top. Like, I should be able to at least try to stand up. But his grip fighting and his knee pulling was so good that I just was like, I was basically just a grappling dummy for him. And it's terrifying when that happens. He actually the match, if I recall, he stack passed the shit out of me, broke my rib, and then got to side control. He couldn't sub me. He mounted me, couldn't sub me. And then he just basically grabbed me and rolled over into closed guard. And I was just like, oh my God, this is like horrible. I'm hurt. I can't do anything. Now I'm in this guy's closed guard. And then he swept me again from closed guard. It's just like, he was just racking up points and I'm just getting tuned up basically by this like really, really good fighter. And yeah, the closed guard is, it's miserable. When you're stuck inside someone's closed guard and you can't do anything, it fucking sucks. So shout out to Paulo Costa, and closed guard definitely is on my list. Why didn't I pick takedowns? Because for the reasons like I said earlier, you could be a very effective jiu-jitsu fighter. You can win worlds and win IBJJF tournaments without doing a single takedown. I think building your game from the ground up is very, very important. Now, if you're an MMA fighter, you absolutely need to know takedowns. If you're learning jiu-jitsu for self-defense, yes, you need to know takedowns. If you're wanting to do like submission wrestling, of course you need to know takedowns, but not, I would say, a foundational system or skill for the absolute beginner. As a disclaimer, if you're going to teach takedowns to people, first teach them how to fall. That is so important. I've made that mistake before, teaching people like single legs and then trying to put them live, and people are not following correctly, and it is not a good thing. Takedowns are one of the biggest scenarios where you're going to get injured in jiu-jitsu. So make sure that when you teach it, you always teach people how to fall. All right. So the top 5 systems that I recommend for beginners, they are half guard pins passing and also half guard escaping on that. Like I said, they kind of go hand in hand. Coyote half guard or lower leg shift, kiss of the dragon, Ashi Garami and its variations, and good old fashioned closed guard. All right, let's switch gears now. We're going to talk about my recap of the revolution. So just to put things in context, for the last, excuse me, for the last 2 months or so, I've been preparing for ADCC Vancouver. And that is, by the time you hear this, it will be on the weekend, I believe, if not next weekend. And 2 weeks before ADCC Vancouver is the Revolution. The Revolution is a tournament that is held a couple times a year in Puyallup, Washington, which is like a 3-hour drive from me here in Vancouver. And I signed up for Gi and Nogi. And it was kind of like a warm up for ADCC. I've been working my wrestling, and I really wanted to, I wanted to stand with my opponent at this tournament and sort of test out my wrestling. And so I signed up for the Masters Gi division because there was nobody in adult. And then I signed up for the adult no gi division, which had like 8 guys in it, or 9 guys. I was really pumped for it. But unfortunately, I got injured in my first match, like 2 minutes in. I went with this guy from GB Seattle, I think. His name is Josh some Brazilian name. Anyways, we start standing. He's quite a bit taller than me. He actually hit me with a beautiful Koichigari off of like a double collar grip or a collar sleeve grip. Took me down early. I was like, fuck, this is not good. And the matches are shorter in Masters, so it's less time to catch up. Anyways, he starts passing me. I'm recovering my guard. I actually didn't feel too threatened in terms of the guard passing. Like he was trying to go for like an over under. He was trying to go into a stack pass position. Didn't make me turtle or anything. I was just, just doing my usual guard recovery, trying to get back to an open guard. And, he was doing like an over under, and I was throwing my leg over and popped my own rib really, really badly. Like I felt the rib pop. Didn't know if it was broken or not, or fractured. I think I actually, at the end of the day, I think it's the cartilage that's damaged, which has happened to me many times before. Like I mentioned, when I fought Paulo Costa in Portland, he had a double unders pass, and just from trying to keep my guard, I popped my rib kind of in the same way, and might actually be in the same spot. But I was able to continue for that match. This match, I felt it shift so bad. Immediately I had issues breathing. And I tapped out instantly, could barely get up, and it's hurting right now really, really badly. So I haven't really been, that would have been a couple days ago, would have been last weekend from the time that I'm filming this. And I haven't been rolling at all. And it hurts to breathe past 50%. It hurts to cough. It sucks. Rib injuries suck. I will say it sucks because you can't do jiu-jitsu and you can't do a lot of your conventional workouts that you might normally do. But it's good in that it's not a serious injury, right? As long as it's not puncturing a lung, it's not a serious injury at all. It's going to heal, and it just takes time. There's not much you can do in terms of physio. You just need to rest. And that's really all it is. It's an annoying injury that just takes time. I'm just fortunate that it's not my knee or my neck or my shoulders or back or anything like that. It's just one of those things, and like, right after it happened, if you've listened to the show, I'm sure you've been injured before. And we all know that feeling. You feel something pop, you feel some pain or whatever. And then like, what are your initial thoughts? It's like, okay, can I continue is usually the first thing you think about. And I took like 2 seconds where I took a deep breath. I tried to move my hips a little bit. And then I was like, no, this is so bad that like, if I continue, I'm going to lose anyways. Like I can't really even sit up. I was having trouble sitting up. I have trouble lying down to go to bed. I have trouble taking a shit. Like I said, coughing and deep breathing, I have trouble. So it's like, I knew that it just wasn't worth it for me to like try and push through something like that. It's not like ADCC Worlds or anything. It's not the World Championship. So I just tapped out, and it took me a couple minutes to get off the mats. It was so bad. But those initial thoughts where you're like, can I continue? Fuck, I can't continue. What does this mean moving forward? I play on 2 hockey teams. Now I'm probably not playing hockey for 6 to 8 weeks. All my private lessons that I had booked over the next month or 2, probably gone because I can't roll. How am I going to, what are classes going to look like now? Like I can't roll in class, but I might even have issues demonstrating moves. And as I went to the gym, I was able to demonstrate some stuff, but I can't have people on top of me. I got to be careful how I turn and twist my body. So those initial thoughts, like they just all come to you all at once. Me, maybe, 10 years ago as a younger, less experienced grappler would probably be a lot more panicked. You like been through less injuries. You're not used to getting injured because you're younger, and you're probably, these thoughts are going through your mind. Like, okay, shit. Am I going to be okay? Like, how much time am I going to need to take off? Okay, my opponents are all going to be getting better, and I'm not going to be able to get better because I'm not going to be able to roll. Like, these are the thoughts of a less experienced, less mature version of myself. Whereas now I've been through so many injuries, I actually kind of got over it pretty quickly. There was about 2 to 5 minutes, I would say, where I was a little bit upset. I was more upset that I couldn't display my jujitsu more than the injury. Like I was upset, obviously, that I knew ADCC was now not going to be a possibility. And I was really looking forward to that tournament. I had an excellent camp. My preparation was excellent. I felt really, really good. And then it's just like I was literally just high legging and I blew my own rib out. And it's just, that is the type of thing that can just happen in this sport. And I've had it happen. I've probably popped my rib in different ways in jiu-jitsu 5 to 6 times in my career I can think of. And they do take a while to heal, but like I said, they're usually not serious at all. And of course you're going to have those thoughts of like disappointment. The younger me would have had like fear, and the fear is coming from the unknown, right? Like not knowing if I'm going to be coming back anytime soon, not being through those injuries before. I'm panicking. Oh man, like really, I'm also afraid because my routine is going to suffer. As somebody who wants to train every day, it's like, now I know I can't train every day. What does that mean? Can I still get better? But now I'm more experienced. And honestly, after having my knee fixed, that was an injury and a recovery that was quite extensive. It was like almost a year. So after going through something like that, you really do learn a lot about how you can work around an injury. You learn a lot about patience. You learn a lot about like how your shift can focus from yourself to the focus of your students, right? Like after I had my knee hurt, I really thought about, okay, it's no longer about me right now. It's about how can I make my students better, because I can step into more of a coaching role. And that's something that still can reward me quite a bit. Whereas earlier on in my career, I might be like, fuck, my knee is broken. Like I remember when I first tore my meniscus, I was so scared. So scared because I didn't know what it was. My knee was locked. I didn't know if it was my ACL, didn't know if it was my meniscus, didn't know if it could be fixed, didn't know how long it would take to be fixed. It was just such a new thing. And that fear of the unknown is something that we all experience as humans, right? It's just natural. The fear of like not knowing if my routine is going to be okay, or if everyone's going to get better and I'm going to get left behind. Like these are the kind of things. Injuries create fear a lot of the time. But when you've gone through enough injuries and you've had to take these long layoffs, you know that there is ways to get better. A lot of mental focus, a lot of observing. I'm lucky that I get to go to a place and observe jiu-jitsu every day, and I actually get better by watching, and I feel better by helping people. So now my shift is focusing towards helping my students be successful at ADCC 2 weeks from the revolution. And it sucks that I can't be there, but at the same time, I know that I'll be back, right? I've been through things like this enough times to know that, yes, you will get through it. You're not going to be hurt forever. And, moving forward is healthy. And it didn't take me that long to just get over it. I wasn't even upset for that long. It was like 2 minutes of me being kind of pissed that I couldn't do my no-gi division, couldn't do ADCC. And then after ADCC, I was willing to I was ready to take some time off through the holidays and get back at it next year. But now it's kind of like a forced hiatus rather than something that I chose. I will say though, something that happens after a tournament and after an injury especially is like relief, because then in a way you're like, okay, well, I don't need to make weight anymore. That's a positive thing. So I can eat my face off if I want. I'm disappointed, but I'm relieved at the same time. I know that there's the stresses of competition. The stresses of competition are now not there anymore, because I don't need to stress about the competition anymore. So it's such a strange contrast of emotions. On one hand, you're sad, you're angry, but you're also relieved that you don't have to, that you can kind of relax now. And you're also, it's strange, relieved, angry. Another thing I feel is grateful that it wasn't a more severe injury, right? Like I've hurt my knee badly in competition, and this is nothing compared to that. Like I was thinking to myself, well, at least it wasn't my knee, right? At least this isn't my shoulder. At least this isn't my neck. And what's the best way to move forward from this? What are my next couple weeks going to look like? What am I capable of doing? And just, I think from being through injuries before, it was something that I was kind of prepared to go through. And as you guys, I'm sure all know, you've all gone through injuries. If you're listening to this show, I'm sure if you haven't gone through injuries, you will. Trust me. But it's important to understand that, injuries don't last forever. There is still ways to get better. Like I said, you can always study. There's so much material out there that you can study nowadays. And even if you are injured, I believe that you should make your way to the gym, right? You should try and make your way to the gym. It will make you feel better just by being around the guys and watching them train, and you can learn from watching people train. So moving forward, I'm just going to be like resting and trying to help my students get as good as they can be, ready for ADCC. And now I have my full attention on them. I don't got to worry about my own preparation. I don't got to worry about making weight on the scale. All I got to do is rest and try and be the best coach that I can be. And yeah, it is definitely a mix of emotions. It makes me ask myself, like, what do we lose when we get injured? Really, what we lose is time training. Of course, we get upset and we might not be able to compete in a competition. In the grand scheme of things, it's actually not the biggest loss in the world, right? Unless we're talking about like an ACL where you got to get your ACL replaced. Now you're out for a year. Yes, that does suck. It's not the end of the world though. If you like break your fucking neck, like that guy down in fight sports, that's really, really bad. It's very uncommon, but like I was grateful that that didn't happen to me. You know what I mean? It could have been so much more severe in the grand scheme of things. A popped rib is not severe. It's actually just a drop in the bucket when you think about it. A year from now, I'll look back and be like, that was nothing. You know what I mean? It didn't affect my life or my journey really that much. It didn't really impact very much. And so I'm not super upset about it. I'm not angry about it. I'm just sort of observing my emotions and trying to think about, okay, where do I go from here, rather than dwelling on it and being upset that I can't do this tournament or I couldn't do whatever division that I wanted to do. What do we gain from injuries? Honestly, a lot of insight and maturity, right? Like after I had my meniscus repaired, which is almost a year taking time off. Every time I get injured now, I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that you will be able to improve. And even if you are injured, even if you got to take a year off, that doesn't mean you can't come back and still kick ass, right? You can still improve. There's always things that you can work on. Even with my rib injury, I found that I can like skip rope. I can still do certain lifting exercises. I can still study. I can even drill some stuff. So I can still improve, and I'm hoping for a quick turnaround here. I don't sit in the corner and feel sad for myself. Like it's not an abundance mindset. Another question that I asked myself was like, was it a waste? Like my preparation for ADCC, was it a waste? I'm not going to lie. If I had the choice to not do the gi division and avoid this injury, obviously I would do that, knowing what I know now. But my preparation and going through camp and, going to wrestling classes and doing pure wrestling, like that was not a waste. That was something that I put myself through, and it was hard. And I believe that I became a better athlete because of it. And I don't regret any of it. It's not like it was a waste of time for me, even though I never got to like compete at ADCC Vancouver. It's all part of the journey, and I'm grateful for it. So now I have like a sense of gratitude that, like I said, hey, it's not the worst injury in the fucking world, right? Like life goes on. You will get injuries and setbacks. If you don't want to get injured, there's one way you can make sure you never get injured, and that's you just sit your ass at home on the couch, right? Don't leave the couch. Sit there with your bag of chips, watch the game with all the other normies, and don't ever go to jiu-jitsu. And that's how you can make sure you never get injured. And honestly, that's a terrifying life for me. So that's why I go to the gym. And if I understand that injuries are a part of it, it could always be worse. Things in life can always be worse. And now when I look at it, I'm just grateful to be in the position that I'm in. And hopefully within 6 to 8 weeks, I'm going to be back on the mats anyways. All right, guys. So that's my recap of the Revolution. Again, I also want to say the Revolution is a fantastic tournament. They run a very, very punctual tournament, almost too punctual. I was there. I was the first fight, 9 a.m. and I wasn't very used to that. I like having fights early, and I think having the black belts go early is good, but not going to lie, I didn't really get the warm up that I wanted to get, which is unfortunate. But again, you know what? It's on me. I should have been at the venue earlier. Plus, I discussed the 5 systems for beginners in BJJ. Very, very subjective. If you disagree with me, if you agree with me, leave your opinions in the comment section because I want to read them. And, I could have very easily picked 5 different systems for this. Oh, you should learn arm bars first. You should learn rear naked choke first. Like, there's arguments for all of these different systems. But for me, half guard, passing, pinning, escaping, Coyote guard, kiss of the dragon, Ashi Garami, close guard. Those are my 5 picks. And those are things that I teach to all my kids and teach to beginners. And everybody needs to have those systems in their games. All right, guys, that's it. If you want to support the show, check out the links in the bottom. If you can't afford to subscribe to my online academy, I understand times are tough, but something that everybody can afford to do is leave me a like. Share this with somebody. Go to my online academy page on YouTube, check out some free techniques, leave comments, subscribe, like. Just do it right now. Turn this podcast off and just go there and subscribe to it. Like some videos, give me some visibility, and share these videos with your friends. If you have suggestions for the show, the contacts are in the bottom. I really appreciate all you guys checking in, listening. Don't worry, I'm going to be back on the mat soon. And what can I say? This is how jiu-jitsu is, and so is life. Guys, it's been fun talking to you this week. I'll see you next week. Remember, the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. Take care. Bye.